Food for thought. This is, of course, always the sleepy time after lunch, but I think, I hope that you're still up for some more information. We've talked about changing people's tastes and food, the cultures around food. We've talked about growing food, and now we're going to be talking about distributing food, ways to get good food to different groups of people. And we've touched on some of these issues in the course of the morning, but now we're going to have 5 experts, hopefully 6. We're waiting for our last person, who will talk about different aspects of distributing good food, the challenges and the rewards of doing that. So we're going to start with Erin Barnett, who's the director of Local Harvest. She lives in Minneapolis, but it's a national organization, right? Yeah.
In speaking for rural America, I live in Northfield, which is a town of 20,000 people, about 45 minutes south of Minneapolis. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's just a pleasure to be here. I will tell you, I don't get out much. I work from my spare bedroom and have for the last 5.5 years, and so for me to go to the big city and talk about my work is kind of a thrill. So I'd like to talk about our business, which is called Local Harvest, and then I'd like to talk about some of my observations of the buy local movement and the interest and growing interest in direct marketed food. We've been doing Local Harvest since about 1999, and so it's been a fascinating arc to watch. As a little side comment, Fred was talking this morning about, what did he call it, the new idea space? And we started doing this in 99, and it felt to us like the summer of 2007. I don't know if anyone else watches this in the same way that we do. But the summer of 2007, buy local just popped. And it was, you couldn't turn around, at least in southern Minnesota, and not see a billboard or an article in the newspaper or whatever going on and on about buying local. So, the wave continues. So I'm supposed to set this up myself, I guess. I do. I have a separate little video I'm hoping to show, but see if it works. So you might guess I don't do PowerPoint very often. How do I make it go?
How do you make it go?
F5?
Right.
I am clicking on slideshow and then...
With the left-handed button. Yeah, I see. I want to click with this button.
That's what I was doing, but it's...
Oh, it's not.
There we go. From beginning. Thank you. All right, thank you. So Local Harvest is a small company. Just to explain this picture, for those of you who haven't been on a lettuce farm lately, those are lettuce plugs or lettuce starts. And those guys are going to ride behind the tractor. This is a farm in Oregon. And tractor goes this way, they ride behind, they drop them in. Tuk, 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 tuk. Very efficient. This is a CSA farm that we work with that has about 650 members. So Local Harvest is a very small company. We have 4 staff people. We started as a pro bono project of another very small company called Ocean Group, which was a software development company started by 2 foodies. And they wanted to do something interesting and good with their downtime in between paying clients that they could kind of cut their teeth on in terms of GIS technology, and they wanted it to be a gift to the organic farming community. So they hired me to interview a bunch of farmers and ask them, what do you need? And on the central coast of California at that time, what the farmers were telling us was, we need help with marketing. If we can get people to try our food, we got a lifelong customer, because we grow really great food. It's the central coast of California. It's hard to mess it up. But people don't know when the farmers markets are. They don't really know what a CSA is. And that's the sticking point. And we don't want to do marketing. We want to farm. We don't want to be in the office. We're not good at that part. It makes us grumpy. So we said, well, this is our opportunity because we can bring this online. And there really were not any directories like Local Harvest at that time. And there were this is, if you can remember back, broadband was not available in rural communities. Many farmers were not yet using computers much, certainly not for marketing. So it was in its own way a new idea. So our mission is to help family farmers thrive then by connecting them with the consumers who are looking for the good food. And we're a values-based company. In 2003, Local Harvest became its own company, Ocean Group did not survive the bubble burst in the Silicon Valley. And so, but Local Harvest had enough kind of traffic and legs under it that we kept it going. And we needed to add an income stream then, because as a values-based company, we really listened to the farmers when they said, we don't want to have to pay for this service because we're cash-strapped and we don't know if it's going to work and we don't trust you yet anyway. So we are bootstrapping all the time and still are. So we added a catalog in 2003 so that farmers who sell their goods locally, but also sell via mail order, can sell through us. And we are, yes, very aware of the tension that creates. We are actively promoting shipping of some food across the country. And so people can shop with us. We sell things like oranges from small farmers in Florida. We sell heritage turkeys. We sell soaps and honey, and we try to sell things that people can't get locally everywhere in the country. We sell dates, we sell stuff like that. We have some content. This is our homepage if you haven't been there. There's some content. We try to educate people about what is a CSA, how do you pick one, how not to get stung in that experience, how to have it be good. We have a newsletter that goes out every month. We allow our members to have blogs, and many of them are very interesting writers, and it's a rich source of information about what it's like to live on a farm. So our third major activity, then, we have the National Directory, we have this catalog, and then we have a new project called CSA Ware, which is CSA management software for farmers who need help with all of the administrative tasks that go into running a CSA, which is new and totally exciting, and about 4,000 times more work than we anticipated. So our members are people who come to the site and create a listing. And we call it a grassroots directory because we've never had a dime for outreach. And so people have to come to us, and they do in growing numbers. And they fill out a series of online forms, and up pops a listing for them. And then they own that, and they can maintain it. And we encourage them to do so regularly, and they can blog, and they can sell stuff, and they can put photos and all of that. And then the public comes in and puts in their zip code, and they get the list of everybody who's doing local food in their area, and what time is the farmer's market, and who's doing a CSA, and where can we pick apples, and is there a pumpkin patch, and all the things that people are interested in about local food. So here's some numbers. We're a little bit of data geeks at Local Harvest. So 24,306, that's, as of 2 days ago, the number of people who had come in and created a listing for their business in the last 10 or 11 years with us. Right now we're getting about 14 a day, 14 small businesses coming to Local Harvest and creating a listing for themselves. In the last 12 months, we've had 5,077,000 people, unique visitors, for those who know those terms, coming to Local Harvest to look for sources of local food. About 20% of those people, it depends on the season, but in now, which is high season, it's a little higher than that. Overall, about 20% of people are coming in looking for CSAs specifically, and CSAs in their area. I just like this because it makes it feel like we're doing something significant. But in the last year, 1 in 60 Americans have come in looking for local food. That's what that 5 million breaks down to. So one of the things that we're really known for is the CSA aspect of our directory. So we have the largest directory of CSAs in the country, about 4,100 right now, and we just think it's a super interesting phenomenon to be watching, both the growth in the numbers, the actual numbers of CSAs, their decline in some areas, and the tweakage that the ever inventive American entrepreneurs are giving to this model. So we're seeing things that we think of as really positive and interesting, and we see some dilution of that model as well that we have concerns about in the vein of one bad apple spoils the lot. So we think that the good golden image that CSA has really needs to be protected right now, because it is being seen as something that it's a way to make a living as a very small farm. We talked about capital a little bit this morning. You need less for that than you do to enter into being a dairy farmer or corn farmer or anything else. But it also, I consider it advanced farming. To raise 50 to 100 varieties of food in succession and have enough quantity, but not too much, because people don't like to get too much because then they waste and then they leave. Every week, month after month, for a whole year, is not for beginners. But beginners, we get emails every single week from people saying, I had a great garden last year, and I'm going to do a CSA this year. What do you think? How much should I charge? How many, do you think 100 members is too many to start with? And like that. And we just start going, because, because it's not for beginners. And so I think one of the needs that needs to be identified is more training and better training for farmers. We really feel like the farms that we know that they start from not being farmers, didn't grow up on one, and end up having successful CSA operations where they're really making their living, they interned for 5 or 6 years before they started. Okay, so this is the little animation I wanted to show you. This is the growth. Okay, so now I need to. I'm sorry, my PowerPoint is a new one, and this PowerPoint, I have to get out of here to show you this thing. Okay, Richard told me he would set it all up, and I don't know where it is. Oh, there it is. Thank you for reading that. Okay, so, no, I got it now. I'm sorry. I'm panic in front of technology, but I'm doing okay. So what this is going to show you the growth of CSAs as it's reported to us. It just goes once I turn it on to. No, I can do it. No. It seemed like it was going to play, but you can do it. Definitely not that. So I'll set it up while we're figuring it out here. So when farmers join local harvest, we ask them, one of the many questions we ask them is, when did they start their CSA? So it's all self-reported. But we think it's really interesting to wow. Oh, no. See, yeah, those are stills.
Step back one slide and then come back to it.
We tried this before. It isn't going to work in the power. It's not.
Oh, there you go.
No, I'm sorry. It really is much cooler. This is a series of stills that I put on there. This is okay. If we can't get it in 1 minute, we'll just forget about it. But this isn't it. So. Okay, we'll do the stills. I know, and you hit on it and it just doesn't play. Okay, so the first CSAs, the official story on CSAs is that the first 2 started in 1986. So you'll see we have some enterprising people in our directory who claim that they started in 1984. And, what do I know? Maybe they did. 88, it looks like this, a very few more. 92, 96, starting to hit the Midwest a little bit. 2000, 2004, 2005, 2009, 2011. So in the last 5 years, it's grown a lot, as you see. And I think one of the interesting things about it is just why. So, I mean, consumer demand is high. We know that. How much time do I have left? I know I'm wasting a lot of it. A couple minutes. So consumer demand is high, and I think that what we're seeing is just a real longing from people all across the country for what I think of as a sense of intimacy or connection with their food source. We're so accustomed to anonymous food, and I think that we recognize the qualitative difference when we have an interaction that that makes food personal, whether it's with the person itself or with our garden, with the farmer, with our own garden, whatever it is. But I think that I think that's what's driving it. I think it's that really it's a spiritual longing. We didn't evolve to shop at Safeway. We evolved in community, knowing about our food, being very connected with it, and so I think that that's part of what's driving this. I think that back to the land among young people is another thing, and I think that what's going to be interesting, at least to me, is what's happening next. What I hear from CSA farmers this year is that retention is going down among their membership, that it's getting harder to recruit new members, and they're starting to feel, in several places of the country anyway, that the low-hanging fruit has been picked, that now they need to go out to the next circle. And I will tell you that the next circle doesn't necessarily want to eat kale and turnips. And so I think that customization is what's coming, so that people have more choice. Now, if that can be can stay connected to what I think of as the real model, where it's not a food buying club, where there is an actual farm behind it, and not somebody who's really just acting like a wholesaler out of their garage. But if we can keep the authenticity and offer customization, I think that the thing can move outward into the mainstream. And I'll just close with a little tiny story about that, which just cracks me up every single time. So I have a sister who eats Cheez-Its and licorice nips and whatever. And she decided, after shopping at the farmer's market for a couple years in Minnesota, that she was going to join a CSA. And so she asked her friend, about that, like people do. It's the best way to find a CSA. Talk to someone who's been in one. And the friend said, she said, how'd it go for your family, and especially your kids? And the friend said, well, okay, we got a lot of food. We didn't know what it was. And the rule in our house was fry it up in a little butter. If that doesn't work, put some ranch dressing on it. Everybody will be fine.
Thank you, Erin. Well, speaking of kids, we now have Farm to Schools, and Andrea Northrup is going to talk to us about that program.
So we're charged with the task of waking you from your food comas. I hope that we can do that. And I have lots of cute little children to help me do that. So if anyone can, they can. All right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. And my presentation has lots of pretty pictures, and I'll hopefully narrate them with some interesting words about how Farm to School fits in to this notion of rebuilding the American economy one heirloom tomato at a time. So first I'll start with a little bit about DC school children. We have about 80,000 of them here in the district. I was looking for a map of DC, and the first one that came up was homicide map, which tells me something about our city. We have made a lot of great changes, but it's still a very impoverished city for the most part. There's a little bubble, which is like the government area in the northwestern corner, but the rest of the district actually is very, there are high poverty rates. I have this picture here of about 10 kids. There are 10 of them. They're actually on a farm, but most of them probably have never been on a farm before this visit. They're kids from D.C., and 3 out of 10 of them probably live in poverty, according to the statistics. 5 in 10 of them are at risk of being hungry. 4 in 10 are obese or overweight, and 8 out of 10 of them are not getting their 5-a-day fruits and vegetables. And of these kids, about 7 of them are eligible for free or reduced price meals and probably get most of their calories each day at school through the school breakfast, school lunch, and now after school supper program. So that's a little bit about DC kids. They're growing up in an area where the homicide map is the most clicked upon Google search. So some of the issues that we have going on here: child obesity, food deserts, low environmental literacy among these kids. Of course, we have a loss of farmland and farmers in the region. We have an enormous school food system with an enormous carbon footprint. And we have a cultural norm of a lot of processed and chemical-laden foods, which also happen to be very cheap in our community. So a group of us came together as the DC Farm to School Network to try and do something about these issues. The most important of which I see as the child health aspect, but they're all interrelated and they're all very important. So here's our mission. It's to first and foremost improve the health and well-being of school children in the district, but also our environment and food economy by increasing access to healthy local foods, sustainable foods, and reconnect kids with where these foods come from. So we're looking to attack the supply side, which is access to these foods, and the demand side, so building demand for these foods among DC school children. So, okay, somehow this added some little, like, adding them in there. I don't know what that's going on, but, so we want to encourage the schools to buy local and the kids to become locavores, or folks who understand and appreciate local foods. So if you look to the left, that's actually some strawberries and greens that were served at a school for an event we had. You know, you have kids getting out to farms, kids cooking with chefs, and other hands-on education opportunities, and then they actually eat the food. It's amazing. So how does school food work? Well, if you start with this kid who has a tray of food on his plate, and as Ed pointed out, that doesn't always mean he'll eat the food on the tray, but if we start with the kid with the food on his tray, the federal government pays our food service directors to provide meals for children. This happens to be the director of food services for DC Public Schools, named Jeffrey Mills. He has decided to use that money to pay a food service company to provide meals for that children. So Chartwell's is in charge with finding food, whether it's from Cisco or from Keeney Produce, for example, who buys produce from Lois's Produce, who also happens to sell at the Capitol Harvest on the Plaza Farmers Market right outside. Those are some of her sweet potatoes. Jeff and Cisco work together and hire lunch ladies to provide the meals. They work in conjunction with school principals. This is Principal Foster at River Terrace Elementary. Teachers also have a big say. They're the ones, walking through the cafeterias. Whether or not they're engaged is another question. Of course, you have the kids' peers and what they're eating, what's happening at home food-wise, where you buy food in your community, and what's widely available and affordable in your community, who's telling you what to eat. Of course, at the national level, we have other folks deciding what's good and bad for our kids and what the federal government will pay for and what they won't. We also have some local laws. The Healthy Schools Act is a local bill that sets some more stringent nutrition standards, as mentioned, and other community members and community groups trying to influence this whole system. So it's a complicated picture, and it speaks to the fact that we have to work as a community to attack all of these different points and align them all so that what's on that tray is healthy and good for our kids, our economy, and our environment, and that kid actually eats what's on that tray. What is Farm to School? A program that connects schools with local farms. We aim to serve that food in the cafeteria and help students learn more about what's good and what's bad. I don't like to use that dichotomy, about where their food comes from. It can look like a farmer selling it directly to a school food service provider could pick it up at a market, through a collaborative, a cooperative, or through traditional wholesale distributors, a number of different ways. And they can be served in a number of different ways in the school. And of course, just getting the food in the cafeteria is just the beginning. This is actually a picture. Many of these pictures are from DC Farm to School Week, where we spend a week getting kids out to farms and cooking foods in their classrooms with chefs and serving those same foods on their school meals, as I think many of you in the audience were involved with. So I'm going to show you some examples of a couple of schools that I work with. One is DC Bilingual Public Charter School, which is run by an organization called Centronia. This is Beatrice, the food service director there, out visiting a farm with us over in Delaware. She served strawberries and salad greens for that special event that we have. They have a school garden where a local group called City Blossoms helps incorporate garden education and cooking education into the classroom. We were there one day and she was making fajitas from scratch. And Farmer David Marvel from Delaware dropping off some fresh local produce there. E.W. Stokes Public Charter School, that's their food service director up on the right there, Lisa Dobbs. She's talking with actually Casey Warner at the Youth Garden. That other woman there is their school wellness coordinator who works to incorporate the changes they're making in the cafeteria to what's going on in their school garden. And she coordinates incredible community days. They have a whole international food festival at their school. It's pretty awesome. That's actually some local ground beef from a grower in the Shenandoah Valley. It may look like your typical school lunch slop, but it's really good. I had that meal. It was wonderful. And they're doing great things. DC Central Kitchen is more of a food service provider for a couple of schools, and also they have a catering arm, and they provide a lot of shelter meals in the city. They shop primarily at the Shenandoah Valley Produce Auction, where the lettuces and broccoli are taken. They do a lot of processing of local foods, so you see the sauces and salsa there. And I was going to show you a great video, but I'm just not going to do that. DC Public Schools is... Ed gave you a good picture of what's going on there. They've done a great job changing the supply of local foods, and we have a lot of work to do on the demand side. These pictures that you see are kids visiting farms, kids cooking with chefs, and all of those sorts of things. We need more of that. There are probably 10 or 15 kids that you can see in these pictures. There's another 40,000 more who are not getting these types of experiences, and that's where we are now in DC public schools. These kids will try. She's handing them this like vegan bean hamburger thing that she made up for these kids, and they're eating it. But you serve that on their tray without an explanation, and they're not going to eat it. And also, this speaks to the issue of scale. DCPS is serving 60,000 meals each day, whereas E.W. Stokes Public Charter School is serving 200, 300 meals each day. So there are lots of opportunities in that for different sizes of growers and suppliers to fit in, but each scale has its different unique challenges. So what I try and do is actually connect the supply and demand side through direct introductions, trainings, workshops, publications, education, and advocacy. I feel like I orchestrated this event where we had these chefs, and USDA was there, and food service folks were there, and I feel like that's what I do my entire in my work, is connect all of these different pieces and make it come together for the schools. And I do that through a ton of different partners. And if any of you are interested to do more work like this, I would encourage you to look in your community at your far and wide for partners who you may not think would be your partners. I mean, for example, this organization called W Girls are a just group of philanthropic women who reached out to me and were like, we really love your issue. How can we help? So, how am I doing for time here? Maybe a minute.
Should wrap up.
Okay. Recently, we coordinated this Farm to School Week, this Strawberries and Salad Greens Day that I've been talking about. The Healthy Schools Act was a big win because schools get extra money each time that they include a fresh local component in their school meals. And there are a lot of challenges. Like I mentioned, different sizes, different shapes, different needs in each and every school and community, but that also affords a lot of opportunities. There's a lot of inertia in the current school food system. You press a button and a box of perfectly beautiful tomatoes arrives on your door the next day. It's very difficult to break school food service providers' mindset that has a lot more hidden costs than the cheap price tag that it has from Cisco on it. These are some of the ways that we can help rebuild the economy. And these are actually Sam Cass and USDA Deputy Secretary Kathleen Merrigan. So we have this model here going that's starting to work, and we can drive larger scale institutional buyers and USDA folks to notice and to help overcome our challenges and to help that lead the way for other programs and connections between local food and people who eat. Here are some resources for you, and thank you so much. I'm happy to answer any questions later, and happy eating.
Okay, from poor DC children to rather well-heeled Eli's, the Ivy Leaguers from Yale, and Rafi Daharian, who feeds them.
Thank you. Sonia, thank you very much for inviting me to this seminar. I often come to these type of events and walk away with so much more that I bring to it. So, and today certainly has been the case. From our perspective, we look at sustainability from two separate angles. We look at operational efficiencies, and then we also look at food procurement and supply chain management and how that element can enhance overall what we do. Oops. Yeah, there's a slide missing. I had actually a section of the Yale Daily that was published today in this slide, actually, that is not appearing. I'm a Mac user, not a PC user. I don't know what happened to it. But so that particular article in Yale Daily was saying, general announcement, today Yale Dining will serve our beloved chicken tender. If you want to know how to eat the chicken tenders, please read the article of Eric Randall published on this particular day. Now, why this is an important information for students at Yale? Because 2 years ago, we used to actually serve chicken tenders that were purchased from Tyson Food Service, and this product typically is brined product pumped with some chemicals and salt, pre-fried, and then would come to our operations, and we would be frying them, and then served with some sort of gooey marinade and other type of dipping sauces. And believe it or not, students will go crazy for this stuff. So I removed the stuff from our menu, and I received death threat emails. I joke you not, I'm serious. I received emails from parents. I received emails from senior administrators that please provide information reasoning why you have taken this harsh action against the students. So, and students actually, they set up a Facebook account, they did a petition, and they went on and on and on. And I compromised with them that I would not serve this product, but every time we would serve chicken tender, we would buy fresh chicken and we would marinate it in buttermilk overnight, and we will fry it. We will make it from scratch. We will not make it every week. We will make it once every 3 weeks. So therefore, Yale Daily announces to the community that today is the day. All right. I should have been able to put that slide up, but anyway, I oversee a university dining program, and I'm really privileged to work for Yale University. This is a magnificent institution, and I'm not doing marketing for them because they don't need it, but they support sustainability way before I joined the organization, and they continue to support it in all aspects. We have 13 residential dining locations where we serve 11,000 meals a day. We have, as you see, I don't want to go through it, we're a multifaceted organization, so it's not just the students that we serve. We have catering, executive services, we do retail operation, we're basically mixed organization. Overall, I think we do. Oh, here it is. A public service announcement. Today's chicken tender day. Anyway, this story was said. I'm not going to burn my time on it. Now, what do? We have 4 fundamental goals. We have a sustainability plan that by 2013, we're committing to accomplish these 4 goals. We're saying that we will buy 45% of our total purchases will come from sustainable sources. And I'll later explain what does that mean. We're also saying that we're going to reduce our overall energy, water, and resource use. We're saying that we're going to reduce our landfill by 30%, and that we're going to work collaboratively with all stakeholders in increasing the general awareness regarding sustainability initiatives. Now, these goals basically, you see that the goal number 2 has a symbiotic relationship with number 1, because if we reduce our operating costs, we can actually have more money to buy more sustainable food, because sustainable food costs more money. Now, in terms of the definition for sustainability food, we have 4 specific areas. One also is, the first one is this aspect of the local food. Although we're not married to this concept altogether, because in Connecticut we have 89, 90 growing days. So if we limit ourselves to those 90 days, that by the way, incidentally, they're in the summer, where we don't have a school in the summer. So the rest of the year we won't have much to eat. And so then also we talk about organic integrated pest management. Organic is important to us, but we're not married to that concept either. We care more about integrated pest management. We fundamentally believe that IPM is the solution that we're looking. We're not saying that one standard is better. We're not buying conventional, but we believe IPM is the right way to deal with the product that we want to buy. We believe in human condition for the animals, and we definitely will buy only from people that they're paying living wages, and they're taking care of their workers and their employees. That's part of our every contract that we sign with our suppliers. Now, the dilemma for us is that we're not a large organization, but we're large enough to have issues of purchasing and in supply chain side. We buy about 5,500 pounds of poultry, chicken, and so we can't buy from somebody that has to go in the backyard and chases the chicken, and then we buy from them. And we have to buy from size of operation that can support this type of need. You can read the numbers on your own. So yes, this is challenging, but it still is doable. So this is our current status. Okay, 100% of our milk is organic, 78% of our pork is Niman Ranch, beef 100% is from Myers, other kind of beef 40% of it is from Niman Ranch, 90% of the poultry comes from Murray's chicken from upstate New York. These are poultry that is a slaughter for us and actually is never frozen, it's always fresh. So you can see liquid eggs is cage-free. That project costed me a fortune, 100%. Our seafood is always MSC certified. Most of our seafood actually comes from Alaska. Our coffee, dry pasta, you see by yourself that we have a very large footprint of this type of purchases. Well, the list goes on actually, and there are areas that we're 60-50%. These are some of the farmers or places we buy from. So we do not have direct relationship with the farmers. We manage our supply chain through our distributors. Through our contracts, we specifically communicate to our distributors that these are our core values, and if you cannot support these core values, we cannot sign a contract with you. So they have to, from the offset, understand that our purchasing, it's a little bit tricky for them. But ultimately, though, it helps those farmers that they get into the SKU line of a distributor. So let's say, oh, what happened here? So let's say those farmers that they get into the SKU line of a distributor, because of us, not only they can sell to us, but they can sell to much larger group of customers. Now, together with these suppliers also, we do a number of the initiatives. We do farm tours. We do things that it was explained earlier, guest chefs and uncommon market, where we actually buy products directly from the farms and we sell it at the price we bought it from the farmers to our community. Now this year, I'm sorry, this is not working. This year we worked on an initiative to reduce our animal-based protein. And to do that, we wanted to make sure that we are not forcing our students. So we're not taking options away from them, but the options that we were providing to them that were vegetable-based protein or produce were significantly higher quality or at the same quality of the meat options. So we hired a consultant and we worked on this project where we deconstructed our salad bar completely. See, we're the only country in the world that actually have salad bar, believe it or not. Because nowhere in the world, you know, people are asked to go in front of produce and then make their own salads. We studied this. We looked at our students and we noticed that 99% of our students, they end up with something on their plate that they never had intention to have it. And then they put some sort of gooey and salad dressing that the last ingredient in it was oil and vinegar. It was all sorts of other things in it, among all fructose corn syrup, because something had to be attached to these leaves. And like you said, you put ranch dressing, makes everything taste good. And we wanted to walk away from this, and it was a major project for us, and we did. And we prepared the salads for them. We made sure that no matter what option they will have out of this salad bar, it would always be a good option. So the acceptability was a major issue for us. At the beginning, I'm going to go actually this way because I can't control it and I want you to really see this. When we started this project at the beginning, you remember what I told you about chicken tenders? Okay? Everybody hated us. Well, no, actually not everybody hated us. Majority of the students, they said they liked the new salad bar. But there was a minority of the students that they were extremely vocal about it. And they were against this change. So, and this minority in less than 15 minutes, they had a Facebook website, and they had 900 people signed up on this website. And you can imagine what kind of death threats on that website that started appearing. and this time around, this was one constituency that I did not want to fight against. And I wanted to hear them. I really welcomed their recommendation, because I knew that I need this particular constituency as a partner to our organization. We brought them on board, and we tweaked around our platform a little bit, and we relaunched a salad bar. And then the next thing was this one, that you see that this group in here, were the dissatisfied group, and then only 2 months later, they become this much. And there's always going to be a group of people, no matter what you give them, they don't like it. So anyway, this project was a major project, and I want to show you actually some of these salads that we actually served our students. And I'm going to have to be fast about this, because I do want to. So these are some of the salads. Okay. The cost of this salad bar, by the way, was astronomical. I had to cut back on a lot of lamb and beef to be able to afford this. So it wasn't bad choices. It was great choices that they were getting. And generally a deconstructed salad and 4 composite salad. All right. And, through this process, we also realized people that they actually make the salad, our pantry ladies and our chefs, they just fell in love with this whole thing, and they take full ownership of the process. We did increase their wages, by the way, because newly learned skill definitely has to earn you more money. So then we looked at the numbers. 3 months after this whole process, what was our objective? Our objective was to increase plant-based food for our students. And you can see the red one is, the blue is before and the red is after. And you can see in almost every single category, we increased produce consumption. Oh. Beets did very good, by the way. Whoever grew those beets made a lot of money.
Kids like beets too. It's crazy.
You can see green beans, fresh clipped. Carrots did not do well for some reason. Arugula also did very well. And this was also another category. Overall, I wanted to increase legumes, grains, and beans, and we increased those too. Overall, I think we increased by 25% case count, and I think 27% on the dollar, our produce category. Now, our next project is this one. It's Interstate 95. So we realize that we have a prominent place in college university. We are a premier institution, and there are some other university in Boston that they have some brand identity, but they're not as good. And so, when you look at Interstate 95, you will find that just in this corridor, there are millions of non-commercial institutions, between college, universities, or schools, and all sorts of food service. We need to learn what GPOs, group purchasing organization, do well. We need to look at conventional food distribution process. And we need to get some of those lessons and apply it to what we want to do. I met with a hot dog manufacturing, one of the largest in New England, and I asked him, can you get me hot dogs that are nitrate-free, and I can actually have traceability on the meat, and they're low salt? That meet the new salt reduction initiative. And he said, sure I can. That's not a problem. can you buy 15,000 pounds of it every time I do it? Because that's the process for him. Every time he lines up his production line, he's going to have 50 people on that production line. He can't do 2,000 pounds. And he cannot clean up the line before he does his next line. So all he's asking is, can you put more people like you together, and then you place these type of orders? I don't have any problem to do this, but can you create the demand first? And that's time after time, the kind of messages that you hear from manufacturing segment. These guys are in the business of making money. And if somebody is buying from them and committing to buy, and they don't have to market it and save marketing dollars, they will do it. They have no problem. Our problem is how we can actually line ourselves and communicate effectively what we want to do in terms of the sustainability with the large farms. Large farms, by the way, I mean, earlier I heard, being called industrial farms. Industrial farms, I mean, the word industry and industrial is not a bad word, actually, and we shouldn't demonize it. Because somebody has to make the car. I mean, is making cars industrial? You know, agriculture. Of course, if you have massive amount of bad agriculture, that's not good. But I met with the organic farm consortium from California, that they do contract farming for organic and sustainable farming. And this guy was doing 4,800 acres. And he would plot. And they have found a way. And he also, his company owned conventional farms. And he said that there are lessons from organic industry that has to go to the conventional farming, and there are lessons from conventional farming that has to go to organic farming. So one group is not, I mean, we know that conventional food is not making us healthy, that's for sure. But the alternative, for example, for people like me, is not to go to buy from a 10-acre farm. They cannot produce the amount of food that I need to buy. And that's not our marketplace. So I heard a lot of good presentations today, and I think this, this dialogue from, and I used to be, by the way, 12 years ago, a guy that used to go around with presentation and demonize all the big industries. I don't do that anymore. I actually sit around the table with some of the manufacturers, with General Mills, with Ecolab, with Georgia Pacific, and I asked them, how can you actually change some of your methodology so we can actually work with you? And with that, I finish my presentation, and thank you very much.
Okay, now we're going to hear from someone who doesn't really have to create demand for his food because there's so much demand for him. It took me about 4 weeks to get a reservation on a Saturday night at Dino Restaurant.
Come on Monday.
Okay, come on Monday. Dean Cole from Dino.
Hi, I don't have any technology, so I'm not going to have any problems with the computer.
That's a good picture to leave behind, though.
I came to the natural foods industry. I worked for Whole Foods for 10 years and 3 days. And my goal originally was, when I was hired, was in 10 years to own my own restaurant. And in 10 years and 3 days, 10 years less 3 days, we signed the lease on our restaurant. But I came to the natural foods industry from a love of gourmet food, of good food. I was a well-known wine buyer in Los Angeles. I worked for a lot of really good restaurants. And this was at a time when, yes, there was the Santa Monica Farmers Market, but instead of being 16 square blocks, it was, you could actually walk the whole thing in about an hour. The Hollywood Farmers Market was 1 block long. It's now a major enterprise. It's so big, in fact, that the local businesses are kicking it out now that it's helped raise the value of the properties all in the neighborhood there. So I came to Natural Foods because this crazy lady who came to the back of our pizza restaurant and sold us greens, she grew great greens. And I had no idea they were organic. And as a matter of fact, the first few years I was eating them, I didn't even know what organic meant. And then I found out what organic meant, and I found out what she was doing, and then I developed in the business, always working in small restaurants with people who were fanatics about food, and we just kept on turning more and more to natural and artisan production. At one point, I got sick and tired of the restaurant business and decided to try and go do something else. And so I put word out, and at the same time, Whole Foods had just purchased Mrs. Gooch's in Southern California, which didn't have a cheese program, and they did have a cheese program. It was soy cheese, and they didn't have a wine program. So they were looking for a cheese and wine guy, and I was looking for anything but the restaurant business. And we somehow got put in touch, and after about 6 months of interviewing, they finally hired me to create their program. And I created a $17 million profit center for Whole Foods with about 11, 13 stores at the time. As I started rising up in Whole Foods, getting a lot of recognition, I decided I wanted to become a vice president of purchasing for one of the regions. Opportunity came up out here in D.C. I moved out here, and all of a sudden I found myself in charge of $800 million worth of purchasing at retail. And you all of a sudden don't get to taste a lot of food anymore. You don't get to talk to the manufacturers' reps, or even better, the actual producers. You get very far removed from it. And as Whole Foods was growing, it faced the dilemma that you brought up, is how do you supply a large enterprise? And the old model at Whole Foods of letting the cheese buyer in each store figure that question out didn't work anymore. And there were two very big groups of people within the company, and the bean counters and the foodies. And I was definitely in the foodie camp. And those of us who were in the foodie camp were able to stay with really high quality products. But eventually, and unfortunately, the bean counters won out. And Whole Foods enabled the corporate organic industry to grow. Whole Foods partnered with Horizon Milk instead of Organic Valley. Horizon is a conventional dairy that doesn't use certain chemicals. To them, organic is thou shalt not, and they follow those thou shalt not rules as minimally as they have to, and they don't think about what it is they're doing. Organic Valley is a bunch of small little cooperative farms. It's a very different enterprise. Is Organic Valley perfect? No. But I can see a huge difference between that. Horizon put more advertising dollars into Whole Foods' pocket, and that was how the decision was made. And having been very outspoken about being on the foodie side, I sort of got marginalized, realized my time was up, got into a position where I could open my own restaurant, and that's what I did. I have the luxury of having about 90 seats, so I don't have to serve 60,000 children every day, and I can do things that more sensible people don't do. Most restaurants don't take a green cart down to DuPont Farmers Market and load it full of 4 or 5 cartloads of food and then force their wife to take the metro back to the restaurant because there's no room for her in the car. I have done that on more than one occasion and lived to tell you about it. So I want to just sort of talk about understanding that what I do and my devotion to the local food is not the solution to the food problem in the United States. What's the food problem in the United States? Lack of biodiversity, pollution, water problems, unintended health consequences, the lack of antibiotic effectiveness in the United States, the outbreak of diseases in rural areas that we only used to see in inner city. The new source of virulent bacteria is the farm community, because 80% of the antibiotics in the United States, when I first started quoting this statistic, it was over 50. Now it's, according to the latest results, 80% of the antibiotic use in the United States is on farms for non-therapeutic reasons. So our food system is broken. We're killing ourselves. Let's not mention how dependent upon petrochemicals it is and all of those other issues. We just bought a pig from Bev Eggleston, an Ossabaw hog, and we've almost sold the whole thing, which astounds me that this whole crazy idea of Bev's, I mean, it wasn't my idea, I just wrote the check, has worked. And Bev is a real purist, and it's a pasture-raised pig and probably had a name on the farm, and Bev slaughtered it himself and called me with the pig saying, how do you want me to cut it? It was a very interactive process. Okay, Chipotle can't do that. Denny's isn't going to do that. I could buy eggs from Bev. I don't. I buy my eggs from a guy named Tim Durstein, who's in the Amish community up in Pennsylvania. His eggs are wonderful. I feel really good about it. It helps fill the truck that brings me a lot of produce from Tuscarora Organic. When I'm a little short on my produce order, but I've got eggs on the truck, they deliver me anyways because they're getting paid for delivering the eggs. It's this whole distributional issue that I have to deal with. I love Tim's eggs. Before I started using Tim's eggs, I used Kreider Farms. Kreider Farms is the 6th largest producer of eggs in Pennsylvania. They have huge hen houses. They also have a chicken cam that you can watch. And you can see the chickens in the hen house. And these chickens aren't crazy. These chickens don't spend all day pecking each other. These chickens scratch for food, which is available to them on a conveyor belt, so the feces doesn't get into it. They walk around. They have to reach up to get their water. They have beaks. All sorts of wonderful things that Tim's chickens have in abundance. They have a little bit of. But they're not being tortured. I have been in conventional chicken houses. I have been to the place where they raise the rosy chickens in Sonoma County. It's not pretty. Kreider Farms, their eggs were within 10 cents a dozen of the price of conventional eggs delivered to my store. They have a model that reduces pollution in their community. They wanted to expand. The EPA was concerned about some water going through the expansion area of the farm. They had to put together a control program. And over the 6 years they've been farming this new parcel, that river has gotten cleaner. And they're the 6th largest egg producer in Pennsylvania, which is a major egg producing company area. If every egg producer in the United States had the mindset of Kreider Farms, we would be reducing a huge amount of pollution. We would be reducing a huge amount of non-essential usage of antibiotics. We would be improving our health. And that, to me, is where the big win is. So what is Bev Eggleston and Tim Durstein to those guys? I love opera, and opera singers are amazing, and opera producers are amazing. It's an incredible spectacle. And I know a lot of these people. And one thing that you find out is a lot of people involved in popular culture, in rock and roll, in movies, whatever, come to the opera to be inspired. Come to the opera to take something away that they bring back to their very conventional output. And it doesn't mean we're making great quality movies in Hollywood or we're making great music in Hollywood anymore. What it means, though, is that this purest form of opera inspires the masses, and that's what its role is. So to me, the heirloom producers, the little small 10-acre farms, and all of that is a luxury I can afford, at least I hope so, my bank says I can this week, I can afford to indulge at my restaurant. But it's not the answer to our major problems. But the principles that they use and the passion that they bring can inspire some change. And what are the concrete steps that we need to do to start getting this change? Because we're not going to get this change by appealing to the better nature of Tyson's food. You know, it's not going to happen. They get fined every year for burying chickens in manure heaps, and those chickens washed out into the Chesapeake. Every year they get fined for this. The farms never get shut down. No one goes to jail. But, you know, if you're an organic farmer and you wind up with some GE material in your milk because your corn got your feed material got cross-contaminated, you could be sued by Monsanto, and you could pay huge fines, and you could lose your farms, and you will lose your organic certification. But there's no penalty for being Tyson's Foods and polluting the Chesapeake other than a small check. It's just a really perverted system. So what I think we need to do is really, get rid of the subsidies. Get rid of the farm subsidies. And I know that there's some small guys who are going to get hurt by it. But that's what's driving our corn economy. That's what's driving this big corporate monster out there, is that it's subsidies, and you can make more money on subsidies than you can any other way. So let's look to the Bev Egglestons to be inspired, but let's also look to the big guys who are doing the right thing and support them as much as we can.
Okay. From one of the most delicious restaurants in Washington to food deserts. We have Ellen Holtzman, who is with the Food Trust, and she'll tell us about those.
I'm going to make an attempt to switch from Yale dining. I have technical assistance here. Thank you. Thank you, technical assistance. Thank you, Sonia. And thank you, everyone, for coming to hear me speak today. I do a fair amount of traveling for my work at the Food Trust. Most recently, I was in the Mississippi Delta. And for those of you not familiar with the Mississippi Delta, that includes Greenwood, Clarksdale, Indianola, and I was also recently in parts of Tennessee. When I travel, I meet with local people, and I listen to the problems and the concerns that they encounter with the food system in their communities. So when I sat here this morning and I heard my fellow panelists speak and I listened to questions from people in the audience, I listened carefully to hear what the concerns were. And I heard sustainability, scale, competing demands, land use, food security. And these are concerns, and they're concerns for many of us here today. But there's another concern with respect to the current food system in the United States. And these are the concerns that I hear in the Mississippi Delta, in Memphis, Tennessee, in Camden, New Jersey, and in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And that's the concern of food access. Food access is a very real issue. 23.5 million United States residents lack access to affordable, nutritious food. These people live in communities that are characterized by an abundance of highly processed, high-fat, high-sugar, low-nutrition, high-calorie-dense food. And these communities have been labeled food deserts. And they're often characterized by convenience stores, corner stores, and fast food venues. I'm not even going to call them fast food restaurants. So what I want to do here today is tell you a little bit about a program which addresses this concern of food access. This program, which is called the Pennsylvania Fresh Food Financing Initiative, helps communities and neighborhoods where accessing affordable food is a daily challenge. The Food Trust is a nonprofit organization, and our mission is to ensure that everybody has access to affordable, nutritious food. The Food Trust was founded in 1992 in response to an increasing recognition that many Philadelphia residents had no convenient way to purchase fresh, affordable fruits and vegetables. At the Food Trust, we know from working with communities that not everyone has equal access to affordable food, and that many communities fail to provide their residents with adequate access to healthy foods. This is a public health problem, and it has economic consequences. The Food Trust began by opening farmers markets in low-income housing projects and by teaching nutrition education in Philadelphia area public schools. Today we have a network of more than 20 farmers markets in low-income communities, and we have nutrition educators in more than 100 Philadelphia area public schools. We also work in recreation centers, after-school programs. We work with kindergartners to teach them the farm-to-table sequence, and we also work in a farm-to-school program. We also work with school groups and with corner stores, and we try to incentivize corner stores to offer low-fat, nutritious alternatives. We do all this in an attempt to transform the food environment. The Pennsylvania Fresh Food Financing Initiative, which I mentioned before as a response to the problem of food deserts, is a public-private business financing program that's directed at groceries and other fresh food retail. It's the result of a process that was started in about 1999, and at that time, nutrition educators at the Food Trust were coming back to us, and they were telling us that the children that they were working with every day came to them and said, "You're teaching us to ask for fresh fruits, to make that choice over chips and candy and soda, but we can't buy that in our neighborhood stores." And so the Food Trust launched an advocacy campaign, and it was to look into this problem of lack of access. A great deal of research was done, and city council meetings were held. And the Food Trust was given the job of putting together a task force. And the task force was to look at the barriers to the development of healthy food retail in Philadelphia, and also to come up with policy suggestions to address those barriers. Part of the research included creating GIS maps, and these are a series of maps that what we did on these maps was to look at where supermarkets are located, supermarket sales, income of the residents, and diet-related death. And the reason that we looked at diet-related death is because that tells us where people live. And what we found was that the same communities that have little, if any, access to fresh, affordable food are low-income communities that have high rates of diet-related death. The Pennsylvania program was seeded with state money, and it was leveraged 3-to-1 by a community development financial institution. That is a great return on state seed money. The effects of this program have been felt all across the state of Pennsylvania. The program has attracted 203 applications, and 88 applications have been approved for funding. The project has created 1.6 million square feet of fresh food retail. It's created or retained 6,000 jobs, and it's reached more than half of the counties in Pennsylvania. Interestingly, the program has been hailed for its flexibility and its ability to serve a diverse constituency. Projects financed include full-service groceries in urban and rural areas, small stores, as well as CSAs, food co-ops, farmers markets, and public markets. The need to increase access to affordable, nutritious food has been demonstrated by all the work leading up to the creation of the Pennsylvania program. And it's also been demonstrated by the success of the program. But the Food Trust can also support this need through a study that we recently issued called The Grocery Gap: Who Has Access to Affordable Food
and why it matters. This study looked at all the literature that exists for the past 20 years, and that's 130 studies, of food access and the implications. And what we found is that, in fact, accessing healthy food is a challenge for many Americans, that better access corresponds with healthier eating. There is a correlation between healthier eating and the risk of diet-related disease. And we also know that fresh food retail development is good for the local economy in addition to being good for the health of the residents. The Grocery Gap study looked at the economic impact of grocery development. And what we found is that fresh food retail creates jobs, it revitalizes low-income communities, and that groceries and supermarkets and small stores can act as anchors in a community. They create foot traffic, and they bring additional business into those communities. One example of a project that was funded is Haha's Market. And you can see a picture of Mr. and Mrs. Haha on the screen. It's a 900 square foot market, and it's located in the Logan section of Philadelphia. They carry fresh produce, fresh fish, and spices. The store was established in 1989 by the Haas, and they're a Korean immigrant family. Through the Pennsylvania Fresh Food Financing Initiative, they were able to receive grant funding to renovate their refrigeration units, to repair the HVAC equipment, to purchase a much-needed ice machine, to replace the windows in the store, and to expand the store so that they can increase the fresh food options available. Since that time, sales at the store have tripled. What you're seeing now is Kenny's Market. This is a family and employee-owned supermarket, and it operates in Pennsylvania and in some parts of Maryland. Since 1989, when a large chain left Gettysburg, Kenny's Market has been the only supermarket in the area. The median household income in this area is $29,000, and 13.2% of the people live below the poverty line. At a time when many larger chain stores were relocating from the cities to the suburbs, Kenny stayed in the heart of Gettysburg. And through funding from the Pennsylvania program, they were able to increase their inventory so that they could offer fresh produce at affordable prices. You're looking at Bloss's Holiday Market, another story where the owners were older people, they were retiring, and this store was in a 1,400-person rural community in Blossburg, Pennsylvania. If this market closed, that would mean the loss of almost 30 jobs, and this was also the only store in town that could receive food stamps and vouchers for families in need. Through funding, a potential buyer, a very young couple with experience in the supermarket industry, was able to buy this store and continue to offer fresh, affordable food as the only store in town. The last slide I want to show you is an example of where funding from this program helped corner stores. A network of 29 corner stores were given what you see, the barrel refrigerator, and this allowed them to serve child-sized portions of fresh fruit salad. And the benefit of these barrel refrigerators was that the stores, which are very, very small, less than 1,000 square feet, did not have to give up valuable shelf space or refrigeration equipment that they were already using for profitable sodas. But what they found that they made a profit selling these fresh fruit salads. I want to end by telling you that this program has been so successful that through the generous support of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, as well as other foundations, we're now running advocacy campaigns in at least 8 states. In addition to the program in Pennsylvania, we have a program up and running in New York State. There's a program in New Orleans, and there should be a program very soon in Chicago. So we feel that this is a really great way to get access to fresh, affordable food into communities that don't have that access now.
Young. And our final speaker is Pierre Desrochers, who's going to talk about food miles and the question of food miles.
Well, actually, to be honest, I'm going to talk against food miles. I guess I'm the resident contrarian today. Not only that, I also realized, and I was not expecting that, I'm the only foreigner on these panels. So I'm not only going to speak against local food policy, but also for food imports, which is a little bit more than I expected to do. So bear with me. Well, first of all, thanks for inviting me anyway. I'm very grateful to be here. I've learned I've learned several important things today. The first being that I grew up on a farm, which is not something I knew, at least by Canadian standards. I grew up in a small town of 800 people. Most of my neighbors were full-time farmers. My parents bought a house, and like 52 apple trees and 700 maple trees came along with it. We had our own rabbits, but we would trade them with the neighbors because as kids we didn't want to eat our own rabbits. We tried to have chickens for a while, but we had a little terrier dog and he liked the chickens more than we did, so they didn't last long and we gave up after that. But the point is that like many rural kids, I got out of that lifestyle and I never thought I would not only get back into it one day, but actually talk and become something of a policy advocate or contrarian on the issue. And to be honest, this is because of my wife. I met my wife at Johns Hopkins. I saw a number of Johns Hopkins people today about a decade ago. And we were both foreign scholars visiting at the time. She happens to be Japanese. And obviously, if there's one country in the world that cannot sustain a local food policy, it is Japan. But it so happened that a little bit over 3 years ago, we attended a talk given by a prestigious Canadian academic who shall remain nameless, but who declared at one point during his talk that Japanese were the most parasitical people on earth because they depend more than anybody else on foreign food imports to sustain their society. And so my wife took me aside that night and said, no, this doesn't make sense. We're Japanese, we contribute a lot. Nihon ga ichiban, Japan is numero uno if you don't speak Japanese. And so we've got to defend Japan. So I was sort of drafted back writing about food policy, which was not something that I had in mind. Because to be honest, once I got out of the countryside, I sort of became an urban economist, and what attracted me were big city lights and economic development in cities, the role of cities in economic growth, and energy policy. And I'm an economic geographer by training, which means that I was also trained to think about why do certain businesses locate in certain parts of the world, certain places, why is our modern economy organized the way it is, why do we trade between regions, and so I had something of a different background to come at this issue. So with all this being said, the three main points that I want to make in my presentation, I think that there's enough in there to offend everybody here, at least in one way or the other. Moving beyond the bad old days, local food ups and downs, and finally the case against the 100-mile diet. Okay, the bad old days. Again, as somebody who grew up in a conventional, at least, well, this is Dave, right? Anyway, let's just say my first jobs were working for the commercial farmers next to my parents' place. It's not that Revenue Canada ever learned anything about that, but I never found producing food for the commercial market all that satisfying personally. I mean, it's just a job. It's a job like any other. It's long days, it's hot, you've got bugs, and in Canada, obviously, your growing season is obviously limited. And so I don't tend to over-romanticize food production. I mean, it's kind of a lot of hard work, and I was kind of glad to get out of it. And so I come at this angle from looking, well, what were people thinking in the old days, and why did they move out of the countryside in such large numbers to move into cities? And obviously you realize that, well, there were problems with food production. So this is pig raising in Manchester. I don't know if some of you read Marx or Engels back in your college days, but Engels says some very nasty thing about the Irish workers of Manchester raising pigs in their basements and in the backyards of the city. This was true in many places. Now, obviously, I heard a number of people today complain about the fact that people don't pay enough about food today. I think it's kind of a good thing, though, in the end. I mean, local food historically considered before the transportation revolution of the 19th century, before better food preservation technologies came along. High prices, little diversity, and one tiny recurring problem throughout history, famine. The problem was that no traditional agriculture before pesticides and synthetic fertilizers came along could consistently produce enough food to eliminate extensive malnutrition and starvations. Farmers have good years, they have bad years, bad weather, insects and rodents, floods and earthquakes, plant and animal diseases, natural soil degradation. Local food systems are very unstable and unresilient. Just went to the old Encyclopedia Britannica, digged up a few major famines from the past. I won't list them. The point is that an average famine in France in the early 18th century, where 5% of the population die, is considered a normal famine. It's not a major famine, or at least it was not important enough to be included in the old Encyclopedia Britannica. And that's typically the problem of local food. I mean, if you rely on local producers, you'll have bad years, you'll have bad weather conditions, you might have an earthquake. If you cannot tap into the world food supply, you're in trouble. Irish locavores, so as you know, Ireland suffered from the potato blight in the middle of the 1840s. What some people tend to forget today is that the potato blight was actually began in northeastern America, in the U.S. and Pennsylvania, I believe, and then it spread also to all of northern Europe. It's not only that Ireland was affected, it's that Ireland was less connected in the world food market than, let's say, Belgium, northern Germany, or Holland at the time. And these other countries did not face the social collapse that Ireland did because they were better hooked in the world food market. And so they could fall back on other types of food. Not to say that the 1840s were fun in Europe. They're known as the Hungry 40s, if you know a little bit about economic history. But again, there are problems depending on local food. Okay, transition to the modern era. This is Plato with, I don't know again how many of you remember the Republic from your college days. At one point, Socrates asked the other people around him, where should we locate the ideal city? And one of them says, well, what about food? Well, obviously, to find a place where nothing needs to be imported is well nigh impossible. We live in a modern city with the modern conveniences, and they really say that in the Republic. And of course, Greece is good for growing many things. I mean, olives, grapes. Grain, though, was not that great. They used to produce it historically when they were subsistence farmer, but by the time of the emergence of Athens and other large cities, they began importing food from other places. And everywhere you've had city growth in the past, you've had to give up on local food, or at least you've had to begin importing all sorts of foreign food. So the trade-off historically is that as transportation and food preservation improves, you stop storing local food year-round and you start sourcing it in from other places. So this is the potato supply of New York City a century ago. This is what my intellectual ancestors, economic geographers, used to do. So earlier in the year, the supply would come from Bermuda. Bermuda is at something of northern latitude, but it's in the middle of the Gulf Stream, so they've got good growing conditions. Then beginning in March, potatoes would arrive from southern Florida, and then all the way up at the end of September to northern Maine, the St. John, or as we say in Quebec, St. Jean River Valley. A century ago, also people realized that, the food produced in some places is better than others, and you sort of market your food by the fact that it's coming from long distances, the best places to grow it. So this is long-distance brand, Cape Cod cranberries. Obviously, people in, Butte, Montana would not have grown cranberry there, especially if you know a little bit about the history of Butte copper smelting. Am I doing that?
Someone has their...
I don't have a cell phone. I don't have a cell phone. And anyway, nothing was growing in Butte at the time. Copper was very valuable. Electricity was becoming... was becoming something that was obviously really useful. You needed a lot of copper for that, and so people were willing to trade local pollution for imported food. Typical New York City breakfast in 1903. Again, this is an economic geography textbook from a century ago. So the bread comes from probably Minnesota, the coffee Sumatra or Java, the tea from China, sugar from Cuba, meat probably from Texas, prepared in St. Louis, spices from all sorts of tropical locations. The author, Redway, says all these things are found in a great majority of households. This is a New York City farmer's market at the time. I don't know if you can see all the bananas there. But, plenty of it. Yeah, well, it's kind of obvious here. Well, it is anyway. I don't know if you can see through the heads of my colleagues here. But this is a farmer's market in New York City before the song Yes, No Bananas was composed. Yes, No Banana, at least one version of the story is that the song was composed because of the fungi that attacked the Gros Michel bananas that were produced in Panama at the time. And so for a while, because of this, bananas became scarce in New York City, and but eventually these problems were solved by developing more fungi-resistant and other varieties of bananas. But the point is that even a local food market in New York City a century ago had an increasingly large array of non-local, foreign, imported food. And so to get back to that economic geography textbook, the dwelling of Western civilization and its various furnishing, unlike the log house of the frontiersmen of a century or two ago, is a product of almost the whole world, and it is a good thing. People remember what the log cabins were like. I mean, again, your limited local food supply. They enjoy having bananas and other things. Okay, to now offend the people who think that we were so much better before modern farming came along. Well, essentially, if you go back to the 1930s, synthetic fertilizers had been invented. They were not yet prevalent. For crying out loud, most American farms still probably didn't have electricity at the time. Were people so much happier about their food supply? Well, no, not really. You look at the activist literature of the day. Two famous books of the time, 100 Million Guinea Pigs, Dangers in Everyday Foods, Drugs and Cosmetics, American Chambers of Horrors, The Truth About Food and Drugs. What are people worrying about? Is it DDT, synthetic pesticides? Well, no, they're not yet on the market. Arsenic and other things like that are viewed as a major problem. Again, it's not because you're nice to bugs that they will stay away from your fruits and your crops. So these are the pears that started a revival of the fruit industry in Massachusetts. What often happens at the time, at least that's my sense of the literature so far, some quote-unquote foreign food will be found to be toxic, and it so happens that the state officials are very gung-ho to keep it out of the state, and somehow these things are never found on local food production. So these are California fruits that were shipped in Massachusetts. They were sort of kept out. You might say, well, okay, not too bad. But then the same thing happened to American apple producers in the United Kingdom. Some arsenic was found on American apples, and suddenly, foreign apples became bad, except for Australian apples, because the Australians had more connection with the British authorities. So Australian apples still got in, but American apples and Canadian, unfortunately, were still part of the empire, but apparently not as clever as the Australians, were sort of hurt that way. What about the environment and food production? This book is called The Rape of the Earth. It's a world survey of soil erosion, published in 1939. Again, old-fashioned farming. What's interesting is that in those days, people complain about old-fashioned farming being bad for the environment. Obviously, these are the days of the Dust Bowl, but you look around the world and they say, oh my God, we cannot let technologically unsophisticated black, brown, and yellow people farm. Look at what they do. They increase their number of cattle. They don't think long-term. So, we need colonial authorities to take care of these people. You don't let children play with fire. That's a real quote. You don't let black, brown, yellow farmers farm on their own. They need colonial authorities to take care of them. And it seems to me that there's a bit... you should be careful when you advocate old-fashioned methods, and there's a kind of an intellectual legacy there that is perhaps is going to pop up at some point. Okay, local foods ups and downs. So railroad comes along, steamships, all of that. I'm an urban economics guy, so it seems to me I haven't seen any number. Perhaps it's a paper I'll write one day, but there's probably a correlation between local food movements in cities and parking lots. And what I mean by that is that it's a well-known fact that in urban studies, parking lots are an indicator of economic downturns. Empty space in cities will be converted to parking lots when the economy is not good. The economy picks up, the land becomes more valuable. Parking lots are converted to other things. The same is probably true for local food initiatives. So the potato patches of the late 19th century, big recession in Detroit and other places. School gardens, so recession, wars, and this is again where I offend many of you, I guess, some form of romanticism of food production and the rural lifestyle. This was the Woodrow Wilson School, so I thought I would bring in some for World War I posters. So help feed yourself, make backyards and vacant lots productive. 1970s, 17, work a garden, raise chickens, do your share. Save money the easy way, grow a garden. Well, is it so easy? People enjoy producing food in their backyard for a while, then they probably realize it's a lot of work and they're not as good as professional farmers, so they will probably move on to other hobbies. Sorry. Finally, the case against the 100-mile diet. Okay, I hear all these wonderful things supposedly about increased local food, and okay, blame this on the fact that I'm a Canadian, and we often get frustrated by American custom officers coming with all sorts of excuses to keep our food out, but here goes. Health and safety, social security, environmental, and economics. Health, I think there's a lot more to be said on behalf of central distribution systems than, at least central distribution nodes, than people give them credit for. Of course, we still have food contamination problems, and shipment from one place now might contaminate, if you will, distribution points over a much larger area than in the past. But at least we can trace the source of that contamination. We can do something about it. Whereas I think in the past, people were simply going sick and not reporting the problem. So I don't believe that things have gotten worse. I think they've gotten better that way. Besides, since one is poisoning your customers, good for the bottom line. Is local food more nutritious? All I'll say here is that it seems to me the main argument is that, well, if food comes from a long distance, it has to be stored for a while, or at least spends a few days on a container ship or what have you. Local food is fresh. Well, okay, it's fresh for 24 hours or something, but where I'm from, you would pick up your apples in September. If you ate them in March while you had cold storage in the winter, is that better than importing apples from the southern hemisphere, where their winter is our summer and vice versa? Not too sure about that. Social, 99% of us now are food consumers, not producers. I'm all for creating social event. I'm from Toronto, which has a thriving neighborhood life and probably no food desert to speak of. But then does the food need to be local? I mean, if you want to create community bonds, improve social life in your neighborhood, something like the Taste of the Danforth, it's basically a Greek food feast, is nice, but it's a Greek food feast. I mean, we don't grow olives in Canada. I mean, we try as we might, we won't. Security, again, it seems to me there's often this false choice between our own local farmer or one evil foreigner. Well, no, not really. It's between your own local farmers and a bunch of evil foreigners, but there will always be one of those who will be willing to sell you food if you have trouble. And I think it seems to me that trying to increase resiliency by increasing your percentage of local food is kind of nonsensical, especially in a business as risky as farming. I mean, if you want a resilient strategy or a stable strategy as an investor, you don't put all your egg in one basket, and especially not in one volatile basket. I mean, it seems to me it's kind of the opposite of increasing security or stability. Environmental, food miles basic assumption, local production equals foreign production minus transportation. Well, obviously not. I mean, some places are just more productive at producing things than others. And I'm not just talking about bananas in the St. Lawrence Valley where I'm from, but even in climates that are fairly similar, like New Zealand and England, the Kiwis are just much better at producing apples, lamb, and milk solid. I mean, their pasture land is much richer, full of clover. They don't need to give their dairy cows feed supplement, and so they're able to actually outcompete the Brits, even though they have to ship things over long distances. This is a sophisticated audience. I don't need to tell you about life cycle analysis and what a tiny portion of the overall picture transportation is. But the mode of transportation, of course, varies a lot. Container shipping versus a small pickup truck with a few things in the back going to the farmer's market. I assume you've all heard those arguments before. It's kind of more controversial here. I'm going as fast as I can. Okay, a lot of people say that modern farming is unsustainable. Well, fair enough, where you grow the food, there's not much biodiversity. On the other hand, forests the world over in every economy that is at the level of development of Chile or above is seeing a comeback in terms of its forested area. Yes, we do lose some urban land to urban sprawl, but we're losing even more of it to farmers simply moving out or of agriculture or reforesting their land or just letting it lie fallow and getting some increased biodiversity that way. So we have problems in the tropical belts the world over, from the Amazon to Central Africa to Southeast Asia. But again, as soon as you reach a certain point of economic development and you add up more modern technologies, your forests either increase in size or else in places like Japan where they have no room to grow, they tend to improve in terms of their overall quality. In terms of economics, issues that have been raised, well, you know, if you buy local food instead of foreign food, if the reason why you were buying foreign food to begin with was that it was cheaper for a product of similar quality, well, you end up spending more money that way. That's less money that you have to spend on other things, including other local items that might not be food items, but might be local anyway. And if you want Canadians to buy your stuff, you might as well buy some of ours. I'm just saying. Much less variety, too. Conclusion. Okay, local food. I think it's gonna cost you more if you buy it because it's local rather than because it makes economic sense or it provides some value added. If only a pleasant experience in terms of picking your own apples. I think you cannot claim any economic benefits for that. I would argue even greater environmental damage because the reason why food became specialized in some parts of the world is that it made more sense to grow certain items in some parts of the world rather than others. So if you want to produce them closer to home but are not as productive, then you end up needing more land. And as far as I'm concerned, the only good agriculture, as far as biodiversity is concerned, is no agriculture whatsoever. So I'd rather have no agriculture or food produced in the most productive areas. I would argue less food security and also significant penalty to developing economies. I mean, it's one thing to encourage local farmers. Keep in mind that the only way that some countries have to sort of kickstart their economy or improve their standard of livings, providing clean water to their citizens or sewage system, is through agriculture, and people there are still willing to work on farm and ship you products. Alternatives, so I'll be honest about that. I mean, I hate the Europeans even much, but I don't like your food policy very much. So kill the subsidies to ethanol, corn production, stuff like that. Things will sort of sort their way. So end reverse subsidies. Don't be shy about importing foreign foods. And cities are not bad for the environment. Yes, they don't have much biodiversity, but I would rather have people concentrated in some places, food concentrated in the best locations, and I think that way the world will be better off and we'll be better able to sustain the few additional billion people we need to add in coming years. So if you have not had enough with me, this is a short policy primer I wrote with my Japanese wife a couple of years ago. Our book is supposed to be coming out next year. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Pierre certainly got us going. People have some comments about that and other things. But anyway, we're running a little bit late, but we're just going to take 15 minutes for questions now. So please wait for the mic. Raise your hands. Stunned into silence. You want your coffee? Oh, right here. Yeah. Ben, right here.
Hi, I'm Callie here, and I'm an intern for Organic Farming Research Foundation. And I just have a question more for Rafi and Andrea. If you could just touch on some of the insurance issues with local farmers trying to get their food into schools, as well as contractual issues, especially if you have anything to say about Chartwell's or the challenges within contracts, or how you created better contracts with food service providers.
Well, for us, we have a vendor certification process. And it's very, it's detailed, but it's not doable. Okay, so for example, we buy all our blueberries and raspberries when in season from a farmer in Glastonbury. So what we did with her, we went over her farm. We look at the condition of the farm. We look at her packaging, what kind of packaging she has. Is she in good standing in terms of health department inspection in her facility? We look at overall farm maintenance and what she uses, and then also her workers, how her workers are, how they being compensated. Are they getting living wage? What's the turnover? In terms of the contract itself, it goes through Yale policy. They do need to have an umbrella insurance. But some of her, that also is going to be taken care of by our distributor, because we would like her to send her products to our distributor, and then the distributor would bring the products to us. We don't want to have 100 trucks on our campus from small little places. So for us, the small farms, when they have their products, they have to figure out with the distributor how they're going to get those products to us.
So the National School Lunch Program doesn't have a certification system. They basically say your product has to be grade A or better, and so we argue that a local fresh product is better. So when it comes to insurance, it's up to the individual schools to decide, and they usually set like a $200,000 minimum liability insurance requirement. For the contracts, the National School Lunch Program also prohibits that you have geographic preferencing in your procurement if it's over $25,000 in purchasing. And so for unprocessed agricultural products, schools have to be creative if they want to cut down on the competition and ask for local products. So that's something, these are like complex policy issues that, as Ed was saying earlier, play themselves out on cafeteria trays, but they're, in a large part, big, long words that are kind of confusing. So I'm happy to explain that more to you if you need more.
Anybody else have any? Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, Nancy, right? Yeah, next orange scarf here.
Nancy Burlog, I'm a historian, and this is just a question out of curiosity for Rafi and Andrea. You both mentioned the word cafeteria lady and I think pantry lady as the food servers. Is it that gendered? Are all the preparers women?
Go for it. You can start.
No. No. In case of Sally, she's wonderful. There are a lot of our workers that they work on cold food preparation. They're female. Okay, we have about 35% of our staff are female and the remaining male. And no, that's not the case. We have gender diversity in our organization. But in that particular, the cold prep, there are more female than male.
And I guess I said cafeteria lady, meaning the server on the line. And in DC public schools, I have never seen a man on the serving line. And when you get into the managers and directors, there's more diversity. But the cafeteria line servers are mostly between the ages of 50 and 70, women. Yeah.
I was going to say maybe there were mothers who were there when their kids are in school, but not if they're that old. So probably.
They've been there doing it for a while.
A long time.
They're unionized for
yeah,
sure.
right here. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, Ivy Ken again from George Washington University. I'm thrilled to hear about all these initiatives that are going on. And Pierre, I'm also thrilled to hear your critical thinking on the issue of local. But if I may, aren't you setting a bit of a straw argument? Because I think what each of these individuals has quite rightly diagnosed is that local is a mechanism through which some of the other harms that are associated with centralized and long-distance food can be dealt with. So if we're trying not to have Tyson's chicken, Tyson's which would come from wherever it comes from, part of the solution to that is to know your grower, have it close by, and that eliminates a lot of the harms that you didn't actually talk about in your work.
Okay. Well, I was given 15 minutes. I guess I could have tried to address even more issues. What I'll say is the following. I'm not against local food per se, as long as people are willing to pay for it out of their own pocket. What I am against is policies that actually try to promote local food when it doesn't quite make sense. I think from both an economic and an environmental perspective to produce it there. And I don't think that a little bit of a bad thing is a good thing.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dean. Yeah, go ahead.
Tyson's Foods couldn't use their production model they currently use were it not for the indiscriminate use of antibiotics. And if we actually impose the cost on them of that indiscriminate use of antibiotics, the number of people dying today of preventable illnesses because we don't have antibiotics, I don't think Tyson's Foods would be as profitable, and I don't think they'd be as dominant in the market. Furthermore, Tyson's Foods uses manure piles. The manure piles are washed into our waterways on a regular basis, on a predictable basis. The James River was damaged by the hurricanes of 1999 when fecal matter from pig farms was washed into it, and it wiped out the oyster beds for 10 years. The pig farmers didn't have to pay for that damage. So if we would internalize these externalities and charge people for the pollution, then I would say, yes, let the marketplace determine. But we give large organizations much more right. I mean, Pennsylvania is all over the Amish farmers, but nobody is all over Tyson's Foods, which is the number one polluter. Actually, the number two polluter. The number one polluter is the people out fertilizing their lawn of the Chesapeake Bay. But Tyson's, the chicken farmers and the pig farmers of the Chesapeake watershed are the number two polluter. Let's regulate it.
Yeah, Rafi.
One of the problems that we see on a day-to-day basis is the fact that students that they come actually into university, somehow they've never had this relationship with food. Somehow in our culture, the relationship with food is gone, is disappeared. People don't know where food is coming from. I mean, that just by itself is a very, very important element. You know, connection with your community. Connection, and I know that you said earlier, well, you can have a festival going on, and in that festival you can actually create that kind of connection. But food is more than that. Food is actually something that brings different people together. In our institution, Yale fundamentally believes that education doesn't just happen in the classroom. That education actually happens when people, they live together and they eat together and they talk over these kind of things. It's sad to see a 21 years old, 22 years old graduating from a university and they have never seen a ripe melon. They don't even know how to buy one. They don't know they don't know food, where it comes from. And so by more centralizing the production where is most efficient producing, we lose some of that elements. I think the argument should not be either that particular model or the local model. I think both of them, they have their own legs to stand. And they should be supported.
Yeah, Rosalie.
So I had two questions. Well, I had one comment on that. And again, I think that has to do with the value of farmers and how much we pay farmers, is that these students are very capable of figuring out the latest electronic gadget. So there's not a disconnect in terms of they value certain things and they figure them out. So I think it's larger than just it's the society value, and it has to do with the economics and not maybe the local farmers, but in general, what has driven our ag policy, which has been food security and providing enough food for people to eat, and that lowers the price of food. But I had a question about your sustainability. You had said that you chose IPM as the thing that you wanted to use as a measure of sustainability in choosing your farmers. Or your products. So what was the rationale for IPM over a more complex model where you were actually valuing maybe soils and other factors? Or was it just because there are folks out there that certify like protected harvest on IPM and it was easier to source? I'm assuming it was that, more of an economic decision based on what's available in the marketplace and you can't afford to make your own standards.
We interact with a lot of farmers. And we interview a lot of farmers not only in Connecticut, but we go in different places. Time after time, when you see 50-acre and up-size farm, and you talk to them, especially in an area like Connecticut, that we don't have weather predictability. You can have a very wet season and you can have a dry season. And in the wet season, you're going to have all sorts of fungus and all sorts of disease. And we, in talking to the farmers, we realized that they're not conventional, petroleum fertilizer farmers. They believe in protecting their soil. They believe in taking care of their farm, and their farm husbandry is generally good. But if in fact occasionally they need to have an ounce of some sort of fungicide per acre or per 2 acres, they want to have that method available to them rather than have a Puritan approach to say it's either that or nothing. There are organic farms that they use nicotine as a pesticide, and because the effect of it is not long lasting, they have to use frequent uses of that. Okay, and I'm not saying all of them they do that, but you can use nicotine for your crop and you'll still be organic certified. So we felt, that it's more about us to get to know farmers and creating this relationship when we can. A lot of times when we cannot, but expressing those values to farmers, to us, is important.
I just want to say a quick thing, too. I feel like labeling and certification are like the majillion-pound elephant in the room, because we are a group of very well-educated, we know what we're looking for, maybe in the soil content. But the food service providers I work with, you say organic, and they say, no way. That's way too expensive for me. But then if you explain what farm practice, they don't want to deal with that. And it's a question of finding a way to put 3 letters together and call it IPM and have that be good enough for a food service provider. Or we have to find some balance there. And I mean, I'm just throwing it out there as a huge issue that we need to grapple with. But say that we'll add that to our long list.
Yeah, Ed, did you have a question?
I think you've answered.
Oh.
There was a great silence in the room, and then all of a sudden the questions came. I think it's mainly answered, but I was impressed that Pierre was willing to get up and say that maybe local wasn't the answer, and I was just going to throw it to the panel or even to the audience, possibly even for a vote, whether they thought sustainable had to include local, or whether in fact we could be sustainable and not be local. So.
Or could there be a middle position, not entirely local?
Well,
I don't want to give up my olives.
I go back to what Rosalie said earlier. What that impressed me, which was that it's about practices, not necessarily about where you are, but your practices. And I think that can fit within what Pierre was saying, but I think people all get very defensive when you start arguing against local, and the issues kind of get muddled there. So.
All right, Dean and then Kate, a couple of people.
It's hard to get those practices conveyed to the consumer.
Let me just get a couple more questions and then.
Yeah,
Dean.
one of the statements, or one of the slides that Pierre had about the New Zealand lamb. New Zealand lamb is the most energy efficient lamb in the world. No two ways about it. From a good cooperative, they're all large scale cooperatives, from a good cooperative, it's very, very good flavor. I hate to say this, it's actually better than most Shenandoah lamb that I've tasted. And certainly when you factor in the cost, it's overwhelmingly the best choice. I use it. I don't serve lamb all the time, but when I do, it's almost always the New Zealand. On the other hand, lettuces, whether I buy Earthbound Farms, organic, which is industrial product of the worst type, not that all industrial product is, but or I buy the other stuff from Restaurant Depot that comes in on the trucks daily. What I find is, even though I'm paying $7 for a 3-pound box, I'm better off going to Zach at Tree and Leaf and paying $9 a pound for his lettuce. I get more servings. I get much less waste. I don't have to go and pick through it on a daily basis and throw out 25% of what we have, and it tastes that so much better. Now there are times of the year when I can't get his lettuce mix. Then I have to go to Restaurant Depot and I have to buy what I see as the best product on the shelf.
Kate, yeah, back there. And maybe we'll just collect a couple of questions.
I do think that it's really important to try, at least in an audience like this, to not conflate local with organic, with antibiotic-free, with sustainable, or anything else. They're all actually different. The other thing is, I think that this conversation points to one of the comments I made this morning about that anybody speaking in favor of only one level or one scale in the food system is always going to be wrong. It doesn't matter what level, because there's a trap, as Brandon Bourne has pointed out. There's a trap at every scale. There's all kinds of things that aren't organic about local food or sustainable. The same thing for every scale. And so I think it's better to not conflate them, and it gives you more playing. You've got more room to play if you think of that all the scales relate to each other.
Okay, this gentleman, and then that'll be the last question, comment. Yeah.
Dave Andrews from Food and Water Watch. Well, I'm wondering, listening to this panel and the earlier panels, whether we've still not dealt with some other parts of the food equation. I'm thinking about globalization. I'm thinking about structures of governance. I'm thinking about other elements that are on a trajectory that is in the direction of change rather than keeping the same old. I'm thinking about food policy councils in terms of governance, the notion of food sovereignty. In Canada, you have food charters, which are instruments of governance and localization of food systems. And while big is not always bad, as small is not always beautiful, I think there's a way of mushing things up in a kind of an abstract, non-clear way. I think that the movement that we're going into and is dealing with climate change and dealing with the environment, dealing with economic life, is not simply a trend, but also a necessity. And I just think a little bit more clarity about our terms and the connections between terms is important. But again, go back to food sovereignty, governance, globalization, localization processes. One of the best commentators on this is a Torontan, former American, Jane Jacobs.
Okay, well, I think we need some coffee to give us some clarity. So please join me in thanking our panel, and we're going to reconvene in 15 minutes.